Welcome to another edition of the Gaming Careers Podcast, the resource for people looking to find their fit in the gaming industry. I'm Steve Rudusky, your host, and thanks so much for stopping by. Today we have a great episode about something that I'm very passionate about, art. If you're an aspiring artist looking to break into the gaming industry, whether that's in video games, board games, card games, RPG illustration, whatever, or even if you're not an aspiring professional and just do a lot of doodling on the side, I think you're going to get a lot out of this episode. Our guest today has a lot of experience in a wide variety of different applications for art and how to be successful as an independent contractor or self-employed artist in the workspace. Now, I want to admit right out of the gate that I can't draw to save my life. So, how can I be so passionate about art if I have absolutely no experience in it? Well, that's pretty easy for me because it's the biggest question mark that I have around game design. How do you find an artist to work with, and how do you get very high quality art to represent those ideas or concepts that a game designer has that it's trying to get out visually to other people? That's one of my chief challenges, I think, and perhaps the main reason I reached out to today's guest. If you're a game designer, I think you'll have a lot to get from this episode as well. Without any further ado, let's jump into our interview. Today we have an awesome guest with us on the show. We have Dann May, the Chief Creative Officer for Game Salute. Dan is an art director, illustrator, and graphic designer with years of experience in the industry. Dan, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thanks, Stephen. It's great to be here.
So is your work as a chief creative officer, is that now a full-time gig taking all of your time, or do you still freelance?
It's full-time, but I do consult on the side. So my brother, I think I mentioned, my brother and I worked together for a long time in 3D animation, and he still works as a 3D animator, and I still consult with him on some of the projects he's doing in some of the areas that we've been partners for a long time. So a lot of the areas that I would have taken responsibility for, like storyboarding and some of those areas that he's not as familiar with, I'll still work with him on those on the side. But other than that, it's as far as the games go, I'm exclusive with Game Salute at the moment.
Awesome. So have you seen, you've been in this so long, can you kind of talk a little bit about what you've seen change in the industry from when you started that, might present different opportunities now?
So specifically to game designers or to artists?
To artists, because, somebody that's starting off that just has a passion for art, I'm sure that there are different opportunities available now than when you started.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, the big one that everyone's aware of is the web and working remotely. So as you know, I'm Australian, and Game Salute's an American company. So I work from home, and that works fine for the position I'm in. And I work with a lot of artists all around the world, in every country I can imagine, really. And that all works fine. So I think that's the big one that everyone should be aware of, is that it's getting a job isn't necessarily now about traveling somewhere and living somewhere. I think it can be, and I think a lot of companies want that, but I think especially for a freelance artist, it's much easier and it's almost a preferred situation in a way, being able to work from home and deliver across the net. So that'd probably be the first thing. The second thing, I think that's a big one for up-and-coming artists, is that there's a lot of up-and-coming game designers and independent publishers. So I think more than ever, things like Kickstarter and just the general growth in the board game industry, I think that's really encouraged a lot of designers to self-publish, and it's encouraged a lot of people that maybe had a design and thought, well, I can't get this to a publisher, what am I going to do? Kickstarter suddenly is there, and it's something that encourages people to go out and try to do it themselves. So I think as an artist, that's a great thing that there are all these opportunities to connect with independent publishers that are trying to get their game out there. And I think so if you're trying to get your art out there, it's a great partnership.
Yeah, so I mean, it almost sounds like it's somewhat of the perfect storm. We have technology bridging the gap so that people don't have to be geographically close to where the work is, and then we also kind of have this golden age or mass explosion in game design, which has a hungry need for more art. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. That's I get contact. I've been getting contacts until I changed my website, but I've been getting contacts from many independent publishers looking to get art done, and I've passed that on to other artists, and I think, like you want to, if you're an artist, I think it's a great time if you're interested in gaming. Obviously, you've got the question of, is this a career? Is this something I can make money off and make a living off, and those sort of questions. But I don't even think that's really should be a consideration. And I don't mean that in the sense of, look, don't get paid. I think people should get paid. But I just mean in terms of the big picture, that when you're first starting out, you just can't really worry about whether or not you're going to be having to be able to do it full time or anything like that. I just think you've just got to work through it step by step and build your skills and build your experience. And for me, I wasn't in games for a long time, and I think what I think was good about that is that it allowed me to bring a lot of the experiences and skills that I developed doing other things into the gaming industry and into my work with Game Salute. So that's, something that even if you're not working in games and that is your ultimately what you'd like to do, I think, you've just got to accept this is something which is a benefit to me. It can be of benefit to me, and being able to look creatively at, okay, well, maybe I'm just doing catalog layout or something, or maybe I'm just, doing a logo for someone. But I still think it all builds and then when you get in and when you do your projects, like you find your independent publisher that wants you to do a game with them, just dive in and really enjoy it and love it and put as much time into it as you can. And one thing which I always sort of remembered is there's an artist, James Gurney, that did Dinotopia, and I read his blog, and one thing that he said which sort of stuck with me, which I think is really good advice, is always do your best work for other people. And it's a counterintuitive thing, because you think, I want to do my own project, and so many artists want to do their own projects and they've got their own ideas, and and I think that's awesome, and you should obviously do your best work. And if you look at James Gurney's work, it's incredible. So he obviously is doing good work for himself, but I think that philosophy of just reminding you of that is really important, because you want to make every opportunity count, and I think doing something for someone else, that's something which is going to spread word to other people. That's the people that hire you to do a job are the people that are going to be talking to other people about hiring artists to do a job. So someone can look at work that you've done yourself and say, oh, that's great, I really love his work, but that doesn't really tell you how you tell them how you work when you're working for someone else. Whereas if you do really good work for a client, that builds a reputation for someone that's not only a good artist but delivers and is fun to work with. And I think that's really what you should be building. as you sort of start out, is just try and build a bit of a reputation as someone that's fun to work with and cares about what they do and is willing to go that extra mile.
You've mentioned the portfolio a lot. So can you speak, I guess, to the importance of that portfolio and as it compares to perhaps the schooling itself? So is having a degree really important in art, or is it mostly about the portfolio?
Excuse me just a second. Well, for me, as an art director, it's still 95% about the portfolio. And I have heard other art directors say this in the past, so I don't think I'm alone in it. I tend, if someone sends me qualifications, in all honesty, I glance over them and, I want to see that they've worked on other projects maybe, but in terms of schooling, and I don't really pay much attention to it as an art director in our field, because like I say, it's my job to be able to look at someone's art and look at the projects they've done and to be able to tell literally from the art and from the style and from the quality of the work and the way they put the images together and their choices within the images. That's really where I'm making my decision from. So it's never been a case for me personally where I've thought for more than 5 seconds whether or not someone has a qualification, from a university or something like that. So that's from my point of view. I think because I think that comes back to because you can see that in the art as a board. When you're talking about board game and card game art, you can see the proficiency in the final work. I think if it comes to video games, I think then I'd probably be much more likely to look at it because you're talking about a lot of technical things that people need to know how to do. If they're working in texturing or map painting, there's a lot of technical understanding certain software and those sorts of things that are going to come into whether or not they're going to ultimately work well, even if they have a good and that's something that you probably need tested and approved and qualified through some sort of course. Whereas when it comes purely to someone being able to paint, with it, and if they can do it, if I can see they can do it, that's what qualifies it for me. The only other side would be, will they deliver the project? And the way I sort of tend to see that is that 9 times out of 10, if I look at an artist and I think that they've got the chops visually, that they tend to be able to deliver on time as well. I think it goes hand in hand in a way, and I think it's okay. Because what it is because if I can identify an artist that I think, look, they're okay, but they don't necessarily have the chops, what happens is, or they're not quite right for this project. Maybe they've got their own style, but they're not quite right for what I want. What that tends to mean is that they're going to have to work a lot harder and they're going to fiddle. And I know as myself, as an artist, it can be very hard. If you get into a situation where you're learning and you don't necessarily have the style down, then it's going to take you a lot longer and it's going to become more stressful, and you might want to ignore the project and all those sorts of things. That's just an artist. When you're an artist, those are things that you have to manage and deal with all the time. So I sort of tend to identify it just purely through the art, but I can imagine, and I know that some people will go through the resumes and that makes them feel a lot more safe about it. The 2 ways I would do it if I wanted to just make sure of things, which sometimes you have to, would be, have they done other games? So specifically look at the projects they've done, who they've done them for, which is a pretty basic thing to find out, from Board Game Geek or something. Mm-hmm. And the second thing that I would recommend, and we do a fair bit of, is trials. So we'll pick a smaller project, or we'll say, okay, I need 5 pieces of art from you, by the end of, the month. And sure, we'll work it that way. And what I'll try and do there is I'll try and work it in a way where it's not going to be left hanging if it doesn't work, so a lot of people are willing to do that, for artists are at different stages, and you have to sort of manage that, and respect where they're at in their career and those sorts of things, and and the rates you pay them. But sometimes artists will happily do that for a little bit less money because it's adding to their portfolio if that's sort of at the stage they're at, and they know you're not going to use the work if you don't pay them. So they're happy as just almost like a guided kind of brief that they can get into. So some artists are happy with that. So I would do those sort of trial things, and sometimes I'll even do things like, and it's a bit easier when you're a bigger company because you've got lots of games on, and that's where it's probably a bit more difficult for an independent publisher. But as a bigger company, we've got lots of games coming through, and so I can say, look, do I think this artist is good for this project? I want to try them out on this project. No, maybe not. They're struggling with certain aspect of this project, but I still like their style. So, all right, well, I'll get another artist for this project, and instead of channeling their work into this project, I can say to them, look, this project, I don't think it's right for you, but I've got this other project which I think will be really good for you, so let's go in that direction. And so you can kind of manage it. You're almost sort of testing and trialing them, as part of the workflow and as part of the way you're managing which artists you use on which project and those sorts of things. So it's a little bit different if you're a bigger company. I guess you can kind of afford to do those sort of trials. Yeah.
Sure. And the reason I ask about the schooling versus the portfolio is, there's a big emphasis on education, and I am absolutely a big fan of education. But, I also have a background. I have a master's degree in opera, and it's an artistic profession. Mm-hmm. And so you run into a situation where everybody wants to see essentially my portfolio of performances. Mm-hmm. And what I can do very, very well. Now, what I will say about education is the education can give you more skills in a variety of different medium to be able to basically cast a wider net for my portfolio. So I might be able to perform with a wider spectrum, and I would assume that that's the same thing in an art school. It's a shortcut or a direct route into kind of a broader assembly of techniques that really broaden your horizons potentially in the profession.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So that's I guess the flip side, isn't it, that I didn't really mention, is that it's not that an education isn't a good thing. It's just that I don't look for that at the end of the day. That's not what I'm looking at. So I totally agree. Like, I mean, going to school, I picked up lots and lots of tips and tricks, and like you say, being able to trial different things. So I think an education is almost essential from a point of an artist in terms of improving their skills and like you say, expanding their horizons and those sorts of things. So it is necessary, but the piece of paper isn't as important as the actual results of what you're getting out of that in terms of your art and in terms of what you're producing.
Absolutely. And I kind of wanted to just point that out for our listeners is you can, with a lot of raw talent, you can become incredible at what you're great at. But at the same time, you can also become somewhat of a one-trick pony that is not as flexible to be able to react to the market needs. And I know that I find that in music, and I was kind of testing to see whether that was also true in art.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, that school environment and can be a great, the different projects you get, the different assignments, the different ways that the teachers throw things at you to sort of bounce back at them. I mean, that's huge experience and in being able to adapt and being able to think on your feet and those sorts of things, which are essential. To like you say, to actually being in the marketplace and responding to your clients' needs and even being able to manage the interpersonal and the relationships as well.
Absolutely. So as an artist is developing their portfolio, how do they start getting their work noticed? How do you put that outbound? Because, I'm sure that it's a wide open marketplace and it's pretty hard to decide what your shtick is right out of the gate.
Yeah, it is. Well, I think a lot of artists have a natural style that they've probably been honing for years, and I think that can be a really good way to go. And you hear that a lot from schools, like you've got to sort of define your style. And I think there's a lot of merit to that because obviously in terms of getting work, if someone can look at your style and say, that's what I want, that's what I get, that's always easy and good, and people like to be able to, know what they're going to get. So I think sort of putting together something which has a certain sort of amount of focus to it, I guess, can be good, because then when you do get it out there and you put it on the web and you get your website and you maybe put it up on different art websites like DeviantArt or conceptart.org or some of the others, like the names escape me. I think that's about building a reputation, and I think nowadays that's a big part of. It's not something that I did, but a lot of the artists that I've worked with, they've done that, where they've become part of these communities, and like conceptart.org, where they're working together with other artists and they're getting known within the artist community almost before anything. And I guess that's sort of a continuation of its schooling, and a lot of them probably are still at school. So I think getting it out there just in terms of showing it to other artists and being part of a community is a big thing. I think if you want to be in game art, I think being part of the game community, especially with board games, because it is a bit of a smaller community than video games, and people tend to congregate around Board Game Geek on the web or certain conventions. I think that being around games is definitely a way of getting your art seen. If you're into games, if you like games, which is probably why you're actually wanting to get into game art, I imagine. I don't think there'd be too many people that don't like games that want to get into game art. So be around people that like games. Get your art around people that like games. I think, like the way I did it, I think is a really good way of doing it, because just having your art there and just showing it off isn't going to really get you that far. I think you've just got to get involved in some way. I think just getting involved is probably the best way of getting your art seen. So whether that's getting lucky and getting a job and just doing your best work on it, whether that's getting involved in competitions or something on Board Game Geek, whether that's doing like I did for the D6 generation, finding like-minded people that you respect and that you want to collaborate with, and using your art in that way, that can be huge. I mean, the whole board game community is a very collaborative community, and there's lots of designers out there, and there's lots of people that want to just collaborate and work together. I think that's a great way of getting your art seen. Now, the flip side of that, which can be problematic in some ways, is when you get into these situations where it's like, okay, let's get involved and let's do a game together. Let's create some art together. So how is this going to work? Am I going to pay you? Am I going to give you a share of the game, maybe, a share of whatever the thing is? So,
yeah, and let me jump in there just to kind of set this up, because I think this is a great direction to go into. I imagine that there's going to be a lot of first-time artists working with first-time designers because of where the market is right now. So I think that works as a great lead into what I think you're going to be talking about. So can you talk to, from an artist perspective, about some things that they need to be careful with working with inexperienced game designers, or even being inexperienced artists themselves, and things that they should look out to protect themselves?
Great. Yes. So the artist can get into these situations, and all these situations can happen. I mean, we all know that they can happen in a very organic way, so you can talk to someone and it can just happen, and before you know it, you're creating art someone's creating something and no one wants to get into the mess that comes out of, I did this and you did that and that sort of thing, which surprising, it surprised me in a way. I don't see a lot of that. I mean, I guess a lot of it happens behind closed doors, but I know from past experience with other things I've seen that can definitely happen, where before you know it, you're into a project and suddenly it's like, okay, well, who owns this art? I own it up to this point. What if you've done all this work on it, and then the game designer suddenly gets approached by an artist that's very experienced, that they love their work, and they say, all right, well, I'm going to go with this person instead, and you've already created all this art. And I think ultimately you're going to be better for it anyway as an artist, right? You've done work, but you don't want to get in a situation where you're left hanging or, so I think you've always got to go into any sort of arrangement with that sort of sober blend of enthusiasm for the project and a bit of a sense of, okay, at the same time as we get going with this, let's just sort of set up an understanding of what it is that we're doing here and what it is we're going to get into. So with Game Salute, obviously we use contracts and we've written contracts that are all, we've worked on over the years to try and hone down and develop so that the artist and ourselves are both benefiting from having the contract. But if you don't have any of those sorts of things, those existing documents to sort of lean on, you just have to make sure you have those discussions early on. Unless, there are going to be artists that want to go in and say, look, I don't care. I'm just going to do the art and, I'm happy for whatever happens. It's no problem, and I think sometimes that can be because, look, I just don't want to get into the legal stuff and it's just, let's just do it. And, it's not important. But I think, I don't know, the way I always look at it is it's not really that big a deal to sort it out. It's not that big a deal to just make sure that, you've got a bit of an agreement in place. Okay, this is the contract for when I'm being paid. This is what I'm going to, this is when it's going to be delivered. This is what happens if it doesn't get delivered on that date. All those sort of contingencies, you've just got all that kind of stuff up front once it starts to get serious. I think it's not that hard to do. Even in a sense of, not even worrying if the contract is a legally binding document, at least if you've got it in writing in some sense, that can at least smooth over, any disagreements, that happen. I think most people have a good intention. And I guess some of the little pitfalls that you'd have to sort of watch out for as a designer as well is things if you're going to create you've got a sense of where the game's going to go in the future is probably the biggest part. So if you decide that we're going to share the game, so you're creating the art and I'm creating the design and we're going to share in this game, this is going to be like a 50-50 thing, say. So I'm not going to pay you, but we're collaborating on it. You've got to be very sure of where that game's going to go in the future, because if ultimately you want to get that published and a publisher looks at it, they may not necessarily want to use the art that's with the game at the moment. They may want to reface it for their own, what they need. So whatever sort of situation that you get into, there can be definite benefits from it, from collaborating, but then you just have to look a little bit further ahead and say, okay, what happens if, I guess, and just sort of have a few of those contingencies in place. And then just once you've got that stuff sorted, then you can just have fun and everyone knows what to expect.
I think that's great advice. What I have, I think I probably have a bit of a bias on the, kind of the other side of that being a little bit more, I guess, indignant about how cavalier some people can take an artistic profession. And I know that, when you show up at an event and you say that you're a musician, they're like, oh, well, sing me a song. Like, well, what do you do? And you're an accountant. Can you balance my taxes? It's part of your profession. And I know a lot of, character artists that do portraits and things of that nature, and people will come up to them at a party and want them to do some sketching and really do a good job. And while on the one hand I think that's great and great party entertainment, it is something that you as an artist have spent time to develop your skill and hone your skill, and hopefully are making your livelihood off of the skill as well. So I would just encourage our listeners, if you're an artist, to take that under careful consideration and do, I guess, respect your own work enough to take it seriously, unless you have some of those other objectives that you were talking about.
Well, I guess my sort of mind has been on the idea of, of a very early starting artist at this point. And I think what you've said is exactly right. And I think what that is it's an evolution. So it's something which, as you're getting into this and as you're doing more of it, that's sort of the state you have to evolve to, as you're doing more work. Obviously, like I was saying early on, maybe you're just happy to do it. And I think obviously you want to work with people, like you say, that are going to respect you right from scratch, but more so as you do more and more projects, you need to be coming into the projects as an artist in a way where, you're respecting, look, I could just about do this myself if I wanted to, like those,
right.
I'll just go off and make my own product. And, all good artists know that they have that ability to do that. And absolutely, people can look at it a bit like, well, I've got the idea and I'm going to pay you nothing to do this, and aren't you happy that I'm letting you do your art? That sort of attitude. But artists, as you improve and as you take stock of your own ability and your own growing experience with what you're doing, you've got to manage that as you go. You've got to manage your rates. You've got to manage how much you want to charge. You've got to manage your expectations of the sort of jobs that you might want to do. You've got to even think of like an actor might do, like, well, will I take this job or this job? Sometimes, you do have a choice if both the jobs are at the same time. So there's all those things that you need to manage as you go. And ultimately, they all need to be about doing your best work. And whether that's by being paid more or a project that you really want to do. I mean, that's career choices that you want to make as you go that are about being able to work with people that you like to work with and do good work, I think.
Sure. So, as a starting artist is interacting with designers, can you speak a little bit about how to ask for direction from designers, whether that's, better to have specific direction or, just a broad concept or feel, or is that specific to each artist?
I think it is. I think it's specific to each artist. I think most artists would say they want as much freedom as they can get, probably, I'd imagine. I think good art direction, though, or a good collaboration with the designer can be probably ultimately more beneficial for the project, and it can reap a lot more exciting stuff. So I think if you're a designer approaching an artist, I think you want to think about it like, I want to sort of create a relationship with this artist where we're working on this project together. I'm respecting their input, but what we're doing here is we're trying to work together to create something which is special and that we're both really happy with. I think you got the extreme of just that, this is what I want, this is exactly how I want it, that rigid sort of approach, very rarely, if ever, works. I don't think I've ever seen it work, and it takes a lot of self-awareness on the part of the designer or the person approaching the artist to be able to sort of say, okay, I can't have full control of this, and being able to work in a creative collaboration. A lot of people come into it, they're used to like having someone fix their sink and hire a tradie. And,
Right.
And so this is what I want done when, I want this wall put here and, paint it this color. And I think that if people aren't used to working in a creative collaboration or used to working with artists in a way where you can understand the temperament, the difference between wanting something because you want it and wanting something because that's what the project sort of is crying out for, that there's a different sort of mentality to when you're collaborating. It's not about the individual's vision as much as it is about a shared vision. So I think, that there's that, you can get to that extreme where you're being very, very prescriptive. And the other side of it, I think the other side is probably not as, it still isn't totally beneficial. It can work if you've got really good artists. You can give them one or two really big signposts, and I think you still have to give them some, but you're still giving them as much information, but you're sort of simplifying it into, almost like a director of a film might, where you're just sort of, you're just trying to direct an actor. You're just sort of saying some very basic, think this, or, I'm not a film director, but, you've seen making of things where they'll just sort of say, look, imagine that you're made out of stone or something. I don't know. There's some sort of direction that they happen to give to a certain artist or a certain actor based on the actor's temperament. And I think if you can find those sort of little cues of, which might even just be, this is awesome, you're awesome.
Yeah, and I can jump in there and speak to the the collaborative process, and I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head that a collaboration, especially an artistic collaboration, is not a mechanical process. It's not fix the drain or put up a wall here. For designers, I would draw your attention to the fact that the image of the game that you have exactly in your head right now is not going to be what you end up with after collaboration, because the collaboration is going to grow into something even bigger than what your vision is. Hopefully, if you've made a great collaboration, which I intend, hopefully, that you're doing, the artist is going to be able to bring their creativity and their brilliance to the project, which will be even cooler than what you have in your head.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. That's it. That's the ultimate goal of it, and that's what you're shooting for. So that should be your goal when you go into a relationship with an artist. That this artist is going to make it even cooler than what I imagine. That's what I always look for with artists. Like if I'm going to work with an artist, I want it to be like a left, I take a left step, they take a right step. So everything is moving the project forward. What you're getting back, you're surprised by in a way, but you're pleased by. And sometimes, then, that's great, that part. Then what about this? So I think, it's the collaborative process. It's like a slow sort of step-by-step process. So you don't want to think about it like, okay, this is what I want, and then they're going to throw back this thing to me and I'm going to love it. It's going to be a step-by-step process. You're going to have to sort of work with the occasional tangent, but you're going to find that if you work in a way where it's collaborative and it's a partnership, you're going to find that a good artist, is going to bounce with that. And I think the things that come to mind for me then is you've just got to be aware that you're finding the right artist for your game, because an artist can be a good artist, but if you're trying to make them do something that they aren't comfortable with doing, like it's a different style of art or something that they're used to and those sorts of things, that can create problems where they just aren't able to bounce it back in the same way that maybe you would want to. So it can end up, I don't know, it can end up where you're having to force things.
Well, just end up not being a good partnership in that situation,
exactly.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, right. I mean, just think of an orchestra. There's a lot of different instruments, and they produce a lot of different kind of sounds. If you're looking for a very particular type of sound, don't pick the wrong instrument. Dan, thank you so much for your time. This has been an absolutely incredible interview with tons of information. Can you let our listeners know what projects you're working on right now and where they can find you in social?
Okay, so I can be emailed at dan@gamesalute.com if anyone wants to just have a chat or say hi, or just inquire. I'm always happy to talk to artists about if I have enough time to sort of respond to artists and get portfolio submissions. So you could email me directly there if you wanted to submit your work to us to have a look at.
Okay.
At the moment, I'm working on too many projects to name. So many.
I know that you were working on something with your brother, right?
Okay.
Right?
So I can't say too much because I haven't been cleared to talk about it. But for last year, my brother and I have been working on ideas for custom dice, which are modeled 3D models. They're called polyhero dice, and that's something we've been working with GameSlute getting produced. So I think some people might have seen Rocket Dice, and that's something we're going to be delivering towards the end of the year, I think. And so once that's delivered and the manufacturing process has all been bedded down, we've sort of upped the ante, and now it's going to be some really crazy, awesome looking custom dice in the shapes of swords and maces and shields. And so if you're into role playing and you want to actually be able to roll a sword when you roll your die 6, then this is sort of what we're aiming for, some sort of cool custom dice in the shapes of weapons and armor.
Dan, thank you so much for your time. This has been incredible, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share your experience with us.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everyone.
You've been listening to another edition of the Gaming Careers Podcast. I'm Steve Rudusky, your host, and congratulations for making it through another one. I want to send a quick thank you out to all of my listeners up to this point. The feedback that you've been giving me has been overwhelming and humbling, and I'm just very appreciative that the content that has been presented here has been of help to you in your projects. And I also want to thank everybody that's given me a suggestion on how to improve going forward. It's really exciting to kind of have that participation and that collaboration between you and me, and I'm excited to see where the show goes in the future. All right, so you can find your show notes for this episode at thecompanybar.com/episode 16. There you can find all of the resources that we discussed on the show with links directly to those resources. You can also find an extended interview that allows you to kind of hear a little bit behind the scenes on how these episodes are produced. And in this case, there's a lot of extra content for you to consume if you'd like. Dan and I get into some great conversations that track down some rabbit holes that we both found very interesting that didn't necessarily make it to this show. If you'd like to send feedback or just say hi, please feel free to drop me a line at steve@thecompanybar.com. Or if you want to head over to the website, you can see that there's also the opportunity to take a quick survey to give your feedback about the show. And what else? Oh, there's one other thing that I wanted to mention quickly. I'm exploring the possibility of extending these interviews to a blog post type format. The idea there is to give people that may not be as comfortable speaking over the phone an opportunity to share their experience as well. Now, I'm putting this all the way at the end of this episode because it's still kind of in the beta phase, and I'm still working out some of the format for it, and it's not quite put together yet. But there is a post on the website if you want to check that out further. The idea there is really to give you an opportunity to get exposure for your projects, as well as share your experience with the rest of the gaming community so that we all can get better together. I think it's a pretty cool idea if I can work out some of the details. So check it out if you're interested. All right, that's it for this week. See you next time.